All right, we are back here wrapping our March Madness coverage. UConn, the new national champions, fifth national title in the past 25 years or so. Join me today to wrap up our March Madness coverage here. Host of Seeing Red Podcast, repping his Carton Show t-shirt. Troy Mauriello is here. Troy, how are you?
Mike, I'm doing well. Another college basketball season in the books. Fun tournament. We got our first buzzer beater this past weekend. UConn domination. As a St. John's fan, I'm not too happy about that, but it's always good for the Big East to win our third title in this iteration of the conference. So exciting tournament for sure.
Yeah, so other than Villanova won too, so that's also progress.
Yeah. We've got now two different programs to win. UConn, they're kind of I don't know. I feel like they're like an honorary member of the Big East still, obviously, because they left us a couple of years ago, and it still kind of feels like if a better offer came along, they would probably look elsewhere. But it's always nice to see another member of the conference win and kind of validate the conference's basketball prowess over the past decade or so.
Absolutely. Obviously, we all know UConn won. We're going to sort of dive into all these things here. I'll tell you UConn typically here. First, general thoughts here. I know you have a couple of things we want to discuss off the top here. I'll throw my big grievance out in a minute. You can start with yours.
Yeah. Like we were just talking off air. I mean, it was a fun weekend. Of course, the Final Four games. I thought San Diego State and FAU was really fun. People are going to complain. I haven't seen anything about the ratings yet or anything like that, but I'm sure that the ratings were not great for that game. Two teams that are making their first appearance, of course. But I think that it was a really fun game. FAU controlling obviously the whole way. San Diego State hits the buzzer beater at the end there. Just a really really fun game. I had fun watching it. I was tuned into it. I'm a college basketball fan. I loved it. People are going to complain about the ratings, but I had a lot of fun watching that. My biggest gripe, though, as we mentioned, starting that national title game at 9:20 is just way too late for me. I don't understand it. Well, I understand it. It's because you want the West Coast to tune in, of course, and you want them to kind of all be home and settled from work at, I guess, 6:20 West Coast time. But it kind of really screws over the East Coast, which is where we're watching from. I obviously couldn't even watch the second half of the game really, which is a letdown for me because I'm a huge college basketball fan. But I had to go to work the next morning. I got to go to bed, and I feel like a lot of people are that way as well. It just doesn't seem really, really inducive to getting the biggest rating that you can when you're really not including the entire East Coast in that. So that bothered me. I'd be totally fine starting this game at 8:30, to be honest with you, and ending it by 10:30, 11 o'clock. That's totally fine with me, but the 9:20 starts is too late.
I'm totally with you on that. I mean, we start the Final Four 8:49. I get that CBS likes to have, here's an hour of our show. They've been doing repeats for that, though. It doesn't make sense. It's like, why can't you just come
Mm-hmm.
on at 8, have a pregame show for a half hour, like do the introductions, all that, tip off 8:30, games over by 11
Mm-hmm.
Coast time. I mean, we start the
Mm-hmm.
World Series at 8 o'clock. We don't worry about that West
Mm-hmm.
Coast then. We start the NBA Finals games at like 8:30, 9 o'clock. Like we don't do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's too late. And again, I understand that it's because of the West Coast, but also, isn't it more important to have the entire country see the end of the game instead of the West Coast see the entirety of the game? Like, obviously, if the game starts at 8:30, let's say, yeah, you're losing some of that West Coast audience for the first half, let's say, but by the time that the game would be ending at, let's say, 10:30, 11 o'clock Eastern time, the West Coast is fully home by then and seeing the end of the game, whereas the East Coast doesn't really get to see the end because it's ending at midnight East Coast time. So I feel like it's more important for everyone to see the end of the game than everyone to see the start of the game. But I guess they disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I did stay up to the end last night, even though this game was pretty much completely out of hand at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Simon came on at 12:07 a.m. on Tuesday morning. That's way too late.
Yeah, it's just too late. And again, you're losing so much of your audience, with so much of the country being on the East Coast, of course. I know we can say East Coast bias, but just it's too late. And let's bump it up, like we said, half hour, 45 minutes, please. And everyone would go home happy.
Let me go happier. Now I'll air my grievance here, which is a much smaller one than yours, but we've talked about this off the air here. Who designed this court?
The worst Final Four court I've ever seen. I mean, they completely missed on this one. I am not a fan at all of the colored in key, and it's not a good look. I mean, they could not have done any worse than that.
I mean, I get they kind of tried to do the NASA color scheme a little bit. They have the NASA like logo like writing there on the across pretty cool, but like having the key painted area be like urine yellow is a bad choice.
Yeah, yeah. It does not look good. And with the NASA thing, they just did that in Houston. I think in 2011 they used the same, like they used the NASA logo too. So Like it's like, can we come up with something better for Houston than just the NASA logo? I get that's
No,
what
we
they're
can't.
known for, but come on now, yeah, let's get a little creativity here. And when we do have the creativity, we get, like you said, a urine colored key that just looks terrible.
Yeah, that was god awful. But I mean, apart from that, I mean, we did have some fun this weekend. I want to talk also about like I guess we'll give San Diego State their due real quick here because obviously
Yeah.
one of the moments of the tournament where we have Lamont Butler buzzer beater here. They come, other padded comebacks, so they just grind you back in the game here. Like it was a great moment for them and great for them to get to the final and have their one shining moment basically be the key in the video here. But I do think in terms of the actual thing final here, I think we suffers in all these leagues. I think Florida would put a better fight than they would have against UConn.
Probably. Yeah, yeah. I think San Diego State, they just looked so offensively challenged in this national title game. They started off pretty hot. Actually, we were playing with the Huskies for a little bit, and then 11 plus minutes without a field goal. You look at their stats: 6 of 23 from 3 point range, 26%. And as a team, they shoot 20 or 32% from the field. I mean, just really rough. And it just felt like when they got in that rut in the first half, they were missing some good looks, or they were taking so many contested looks, and then when they were getting some good looks, it just felt like they had no rhythm to their shots, and they were missing those as well. And that allowed UConn to get out to the 16-point lead. And, San Diego State has been the comeback kids for a lot of this tournament. We saw them do it against FAU. But at the end of the day, UConn is a different beast, like you said. And San Diego State, I mean, once that lead got to 16 and it was, 12 at halftime, the game was over. There was just no way. I know they cut it down to 5 for a brief moment in the second half, but there was never really any chance that San Diego State was going to come back in this game. And that's a bummer when your national title game is kind of pretty much decided 15, 20 minutes in.
That went college football playoff too this year. I mean, TCU
Yeah.
really blown out by Georgia, and like they had no
Mm-hmm.
shot after like the first quarter and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll give San Diego State credit, cutting it down and making a little bit of a run in the second half to at least make it interesting in the final couple of minutes. But as opposed to TCU just getting absolutely annihilated and showing no fight. But they just didn't have the firepower. You look at some of their guys. Butler goes 3 of 7 from the floor. Bradley goes 0 of 4 from 3 point range, only scores 8 points, shoots 2 of 9 from the field. They didn't have enough firepower to hang around with UConn, who is, I thought, the deepest team in March Madness. I think that's like the one thing that I got right in our preview shows to this whole tournament, as I think I mentioned that I thought UConn had incredible depth, and I did like them to make a run. But they just showed that off. I mean, they had so many guys that can beat you, so many guys that can hit an open shot. They can beat you inside, they can beat you outside, they can beat you defensively, like we saw in this game, and really smother you defensively. And that's why they're the national champions when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, you go over 11 minutes on scoring a national title game, it's pretty hard to win the game.
Yeah, exactly. That's like we said, maybe FAU would have put up a little bit of a better fight in this game, just because they probably had a little bit more firepower to hang around with UConn in terms of scoring. Because UConn is going to score 75, 80 points a game, but yeah, maybe FAU would have had a little bit more firepower to hang around with them, as opposed to San Diego State, where it felt like a lot of their games were played in really the 50s and the 60s this entire tournament.
Yeah, for sure. Here, let's talk about UConn now. As they are national champions here, and this
Yeah.
might have been the most dominant run we've seen into an NCAA tournament in at least like the last like decade, maybe 2 decades at this point. Because you look at some numbers here, I have some interesting facts here that Matt Norlander and CBS Sports put up today. They're interesting to point out here. UConn trailed by a total of 55 seconds in the second half of the game, which is absolutely absurd. They won every game by at least 13 points, 5 wins by 15 points. The first team to
Hmm.
ever do that, 15 plus points. They trailed for just 5 minutes and 22 seconds total in their final 4 NCAA tournament games. And they
Hmm.
last 4 opponents, was the ones the tougher opponents coming up here, shot under 35% from the floor. I mean, like, there's not like they just crush everybody.
Yeah, yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. One of the more impressive performances that we've seen from a national champion in a while. I actually go back to maybe 2018 with that Villanova team. How they kind of just ran through everyone. They ran through Kansas and Michigan in the Final Four. That's one that comes to mind. But I think even UConn was more impressive than them. Like you mentioned, they did not win a game by less than 13 points this entire tournament. I believe they had the fourth or fifth highest average margin of victory in their games. It was like 20. They just blew everyone out, like you mentioned the stat about never trailing, and they did it on the defensive end, like you mentioned. Holding opponents to below, around 30% shooting. They really smothered teams defensively, but we came into this Final Four kind of saying it's the UConn Invitational, right? 3 teams making their first appearance, and then kind of the budding blue blood in UConn making their fifth or making their hopefully trying to win their 5th national title. And it really was, the UConn Invitational. They kind of, had their way with Miami, and then they controlled the entire game against San Diego State as well. So, I mean, just a really impressive job by UConn, but really one of the more impressive runs that we can mention. And again, you can say about the teams that they played, San Diego State, Miami, obviously a good Gonzaga team, but running through an 8 seed in Arkansas, St. Mary's, and then going back to Iona, maybe not the impressive run of teams in terms of name value, right? Like there's no real like blue blood team that they beat, and obviously beating San Diego State and Miami for their final 2 games. But when you look at the metrics, when you look at KenPom and all these things, like all of those teams are ranked in like the top 30 of KenPom. Like the run of teams that they beat was more impressive when you look at the advanced stats and the metrics than it looks on paper. So I think maybe 20, 30 years from now, we're going to say, man, UConn really ran through Miami and San Diego State and St. Mary's and, an 8 seed in Arkansas to get to their national title. But, when you really do some deep diving or, digging into this, it was an impressive run for UConn to do this against some teams that were really, really talented, and to do it in just dominant fashion where they dribbled out the clock in every single game. Like, I don't know if a national champion can ever say that, where every single game UConn had its, bench in. Danny Hurley's son was in there dribbling out the clock for the final couple of minutes. Like, I don't know if another national champion can say that, and UConn can say that this year. So no matter really who the opponents, that's an impressive feat.
Yeah, I mean, did anybody give them a scare other than Iona for a half in this
Yeah,
tournament?
I want to give Rick Pitino and Iona credit because they were the only team to actually, I think, beat UConn in a half, because I think Iona had the first half lead
Up by
in
2.
that game. Yeah, they were the only team that actually won a single half against UConn this entire tournament. So what's that? UConn played 6 games and 2 halves each game, so 12 halves. They won 11 of those 12 halves. The only one that they did not win was against Iona in the very first one that they played. So just a crazy run for them, and you have to give them credit. I mean, again, anyone that you beat, when you do it in that dominating of a fashion like UConn did, it's very, very impressive, and you got to give them credit.
Yeah, I remember that game well. Like that whole thing, their whole tournament term, when Jordan Hawkins hits the 3 coming out of the half, gets fouled at the 4-point play. They never look back after that.
Yeah, seriously, they really boat raced everyone from there. I mean, St. Mary's, I believe, hung with them a little bit
For
in
about a
that
half.
first half.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the Arkansas game was over before it started. Gonzaga was there around a little bit, but then once Timmy got into foul trouble, that game was over. Miami, they kind of had an arm's length the entire game, and San Diego State the same thing. So they really were not even challenged after that first half. It's just an incredibly impressive performance by them. Again, rolling through 6 teams on their way to the final.
Yeah, and we'll go back to a point I made prior to the tournament. Like, I think also, I think after the first weekend, we talked about this here. Like, this team very underseeded by the committee. I mean, they were on the 4 round, the Virginia team that got knocked out by Furman in the first round.
Yeah.
And seen the loss
Mm-hmm.
as point guard going into the tournament. I mean, they were number 4 in KenPom, which basically says they were equivalent of 1 seed, number 8 in the net. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this team had 2.5 bad weeks in January, and all of a sudden they're
Mm-hmm.
4 seed. Like, that to me says we really have to look at how we're rating these teams.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you look at any of the metrics, it would have told you UConn is a 1 or a 2 seed. And yeah, I mean, this team did not lose a game in non-conference play. They were 14-0, before they kind of hit that sputter. But like you mentioned, it feels like they hit that snag in January, and the committee held it against them really 2 months later. When if you look, I mean, once basically February started, they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8-1 for their final 9 games, and they lose in the Big East tournament to Marquette. Like, they were playing fantastic basketball the final really 2 months of the season heading into the NCAA tournament. So and before that, like I said, in November and December, they rolled through everyone in the non-conference play. So they really felt like they kind of got that one really bad 7 or 8 game stretch in late December and early and really throughout January, and that got held against them the entire way because, like you mentioned, the metrics say that team should have been a 1 or a 2 seed. It's surprising when you look back and say, wow, a 4-seeded UConn won the national title, but at the end of the day, that team should have been way higher seeded.
Yeah, I mean, after from January 31st on, they lose 2 games the entire rest of the season, including the including the tournament here. They were by
Mhm.
3 at Creighton and 2 to Marquette at the Big East tournament. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, like they were in every single game, or both of their losses. They were in there, and that Marquette Big East tournament game, UConn should have won that game. UConn, it felt like, had all the momentum in that game. I remember walking out of that game and saying, "Wow, how did UConn lose that? Like, how did Marquette beat them?" So they really just rolled through everyone. Basically, once the calendar turned to February, like I said, they had really one bad 8 game stretch in January. Outside of that, this was a top 5 team the entire season. I think that they got as high as what, 4 in the country at one point in January. Like, this was a top 5 team for, I don't know, 4 out of the 5 months of the season, let's say. And it kind of felt like maybe that 1 month in January really got held against them, maybe unfairly, because they rolled through everyone basically when it came time, when everything mattered.
yeah, I mean, you look at some of the stuff they had out of conference. I mean, they beat Alabama by 15 on a neutral floor. Alabama was the top overall seed in this tournament. They beat Iowa
Mm-hmm.
State by
Mm-hmm.
8.
Iowa State, yep.
They beat
Mm-hmm.
on neutral floor. They beat Oklahoma State by 10. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
they pick up Clay Quality wins the Big East. Like, you can't tell me that losing 5 of 6 with 2 of the losses to St. John's and Seton Hall is enough to take you down 2 lines.
Yeah, it's absolutely, yeah. It just, again, it just feels like maybe they got underseeded because of that 3 weeks or 3 week stretch. Yeah, but I mean, the non-conference, they crushed Alabama. I believe in the non-conference, every win was by 10 plus points as well. Like, they rolled through every single non-conference opponent that they played this season. Probably should have been a 2 or even a 1 seed. Like I said, we're gonna look back at this, 30 years from now, and you might say, man, that UConn team is a 4 seed. That was a surprising run for them, but when you really look at it and dig deep, it was not that surprising at all, because this team should have been a 1 or 2 seed.
I hope the committee learns about this year. When you screw up the seed on the bracket, it screws up the entire tournament because you have
Yeah.
too low, seeds are too high, and like I guarantee you, CS not throw the ratings they got for some of their for this Final Four because they had basically no name power in there aside from UConn. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it leads to a year like this when you have 3 teams making their first. And I thought we talked about this a couple weeks ago. This was probably one of the worst seeding jobs that they've done in our lifetimes. I think, in terms of underseeding some teams and overseeding some others. But yeah, I mean, I'm a fan, of course, when some of these smaller schools make these runs. It does obviously kill the ratings though when in the Final Four, you kind of have like 3 Cinderellas. I know Miami's in the ACC, but making their first appearance as well, like it really is going to hurt, the interest and the ratings when you have 3 teams that no one really thought would be there in the final to go along with UConn, and it takes a lot of the drama out as well. I mean, we basically from the second that this Final Four was set over a week ago, everyone said, all right, it's probably going to be UConn's title here, and it was never really all that in doubt, like throughout this entire Final Four. I know that we got the great San Diego State FAU game, but just imagine if the winner of that game felt like they actually had a shot in the national title, it would have been a lot better. So yeah, the seeding needs to be better because this was one of the worst seeding jobs we've seen.
I mean, UConn was a 7.5 point favorite in the title game, which you almost never see a spread that high at this game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when do you see that? Especially for like a UConn team that, like we mentioned, was like, this was a 4 versus a 5 seed. Like, theoretically, on paper, it shouldn't be that big of a difference. It should be maybe 2.5, 3.5. And for UConn to go off at 7.5, that again, that shows you, yeah, like they messed up something here.
And they covered easily.
Yeah, and it was never really even in doubt after the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Like, that cover was for the final. Well, I guess at the very end it did get in doubt a little bit, but for 30 minutes of that game, it was not in doubt.
Yeah, I also want to give us credit on the podcast here because we were ahead of the curve because now all the narratives coming out from all the Hassel writes, oh, UConn's a blue blood,
Yes,
like won
yes.
5 titles. I'm like, guys, where have you been? We've been talking about this. Like, you win like 5 titles in 25 years, you're a blue blood. I don't care. Like, where you
Uh,
are.
Yeah, we were doing that conversation like 2 weeks ago, or at the
Yeah.
very least a week ago. Yeah, I noticed that too, and I thought of you. The national conversation now is, oh, you got to include UConn with the blue bloods. Well, yeah, like, obviously, like, they've been one of the best programs in the country of the past 25 years. 5 titles in 25 or in 24 years. Who can say that? Like, that's really impressive. 5-0 in national title games as well. When they get to the national final, they win it, and they have not lost one yet. So yeah, they're a blue blood, and like you said, maybe they're not like the historical blue bloods, like the Kansas and Kentucky's and UCLA and North Carolina, sure, but they are in that kind of like new crop of blue bloods, like you mentioned, like Michigan State, those type of schools. They're absolutely in the conversation with those teams, and anyone who tells you not, I don't know what they're thinking, because they are absolutely in that blue blood conversation.
Yeah, some old guy drinking whiskey and cigars saying, you
Yeah,
this before the 1990s. Therefore, no, blue blood. Where like Has Indiana existed since 1995?
Exactly. Yeah. Like some of these teams that are considered the blue bloods have done really nothing in the past like 30 years. I mean, you can look at Kentucky. They really haven't done a ton in the past 10, 15 years. UCLA too. Like these blue bloods, you have not won in the past 25, 30 years as much as UConn won. Almost I don't think anyone has won as much as UConn has won in since 1999, since they won their first national title. So like if you want to say whatever the new crop of blue bloods or just include them, they are in that conversation 100%.
Yeah, they're in the group, right? But they're there. Villanova is there. Gonzaga
Uh-huh.
is there. They haven't won one yet. Like they're like
Uh-huh.
this new generation of blue bloods, and like they can be up there with like Indiana, Kentucky, and Kansas. Like they may not go back to the 1930s in terms of success rate, but like they're still like the premier programs of the sport.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have that history of 60, 70 years of winning national titles but again, I mean, I don't know how much stock you really put in the 1952 national title or whatever, but they don't have that history, sure, but you put those programs up against anyone in the past 25 years or 20, 25 years, and they match up well with them. So, yeah, like those programs absolutely deserve to be in the conversation.
Yeah, so like Seth Davis, all the other guys, we were first on that one.
We did. We had it first, and I'll give you credit. You
Yeah,
had it. You nailed it last week, and it came up this week. The national media was about a week behind on that.
yeah, they were weak on that. And speaking of something that's gonna be a hot topic coming up here, as you kind of look ahead a little bit. Dan Hurley was asked prior to the Final Four about the idea of expanding the NCAA tournament. He is against it for a lot of reasons, and he's like, "Hey, like it's got to be a privilege to get through the regular season, get to this tournament where we have all these people saying, oh, only 18% of D1 teams make it. It's get more experience for the kids, which to me is complete code for like high majors want more opportunities this tournament. They want to get the tournament money, which to me it's like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't help me any because like they're talking about, like Izzo is talking about expansion. We've heard a lot of the SEC talk about going out as high as 96. We've heard like the ACC feel the same way. To me, it's like
Mm-hmm.
if you're going, and I've heard the argument, oh, Florida Atlantic wouldn't have made it in there, but like, what part of me can makes you believe that this committee will actually give the next
Mm-hmm.
Florida
To
Atlantic an
to
at-large bid over like the ninth place team in the Big Ten?
Yeah, and it's just I mean I think you Dan Hurley and myself are all in lockstep in this. Like it doesn't make any sense to expand it. The bubble is weak every year as is. Like think about some of the teams we had, like Clemson on the bubble this year.
North
We
Carolina,
had some, yeah, North Carolina, yeah, like we had some really bad teams on the bubble this year. Like imagine if we went to 96, like you mentioned, it's gonna be still the power conference team. So you're gonna have like my St. John's team was like 2 games over 500 of that. They would have been in the tournament 100%. They would have been in the NCAA tournament. I can tell you, I watched every second of St. John's basketball this year. They were not an NCAA tournament team. They were nowhere near it. So like expanding the tournament to whatever it is 96, I don't care. It is not a good idea. It just completely devalues the regular season, and it devalues the tournament as well when you're kind of letting anyone in, especially when, like you said, that expansion is going to primarily come from the power conferences, because they're not going to dig and give maybe a fourth bid to the Mountain West or a second bid to the A10 or a third bid to the A10. Like that's not going to happen. It's going to be the 10th bid for the Big Ten and the 11th bid for the SEC or stuff like that. It completely devalues the regular season. It makes the regular season almost meaningless, which is kind of one of the things that I like about college basketball is like, the regular season does mean something. Like it's not the end all be all like it is in college football, where once you lose one or two games, it's over. But at the end of the day, it does mean something to win some games in the college basketball regular season, and I just don't want to see that change. I think they have a perfect thing going with the 68 teams. The four playing teams or first four teams. Why ruin that? Like you've completely perfected this. In the last 10, 15 years. Why ruin it? Just for money and for greed of these power conference schools who don't need any more money. Like I don't understand it.
yeah, two things I'll say. I'll go contrarian here in terms of like how I think this could work in terms of expansion. I think it's only two things that
Mm.
make it work. Is like one, do a very modest up to 72, and then you if two more first 4 days, but only like the last last six
Yeah.
in the field have to play that first four as opposed to like doing the
Hmm.
16 games, which I think is a waste of our time because
Hmm.
those teams get rolled. No offense, Fairleigh Dickinson, who did come out of that and win this year. So
Uh.
that's
Uh.
one option. Number two, like the only way I can see going up as high as 96 if you're guaranteeing that like if you win a like low major, mid major league in the regular season, you get bounced your conference tournament, you get to go. Like that's the only way I would see it being
That's fair.
because I'm
Uh
like
huh.
because like you're telling me the team like let's say last year like Iona won the MAC. they lost the first round of the conference tournament to Rider. They had no shot getting in. Like you're saying,
Uh,
those teams get a shot at it, and those are the higher quality mid majors who prove over the season got tripped up in a tournament. Like that's,
yeah.
but you're
Hmm.
not. They're not going to do that. They're going to give it to like team number 12 and the 14 team Pac-Man.
Exactly.
Big,
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it would be nice. Like those suggestions I would maybe be a little bit more open to, but again, we know that's not going to happen. It's not going to get spread over to the mid majors and the low majors. It's going to get, all the power is going to go back or is going to stay with the high majors. But yeah, I mean, expanding maybe for 4 teams, like you said, a very small, modest expansion going to 72. I wouldn't hate that. That doesn't change like at the core what the tournament is. When you expand to 96 and you're basically expanding the field by, like 1.5 times, I can't go for that. That completely changes what the NCAA tournament is. Even if you said like, all right, the last 30 teams in are going to have to play in like their own play-in tournament, and then we get into the real tournament. Even that, like that just completely devalues the tournament, and it just changes around what is such a perfect entity. Like March is my favorite month of the year. It's my favorite thing to watch of the year, and it is perfect. Like, don't mess with it by adding these teams that don't deserve to be in. Like we said, these high major teams that don't deserve to be in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking at some options here in terms of the 96, in terms of the other bits. The other thing that's also complicated is like, where are you fitting this extra round of games in?
Yeah, that too. Unless you want March Madness to go well into April, I mean, that's the only thing. You'd probably be playing like Sweet 16 games this weekend, I guess, because you'd have to add at least another week probably of games. I don't see how it doesn't work where you wouldn't be playing another week of games, which means that yeah, like your tournament is not ending until probably mid April, and that's a lot of basketball too for these guys. Yeah, so I don't see how it works.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it in terms of like the schedule here. I mean, like, do you think CBS wants to have like this overlapping with the Masters? Have to like cut off their coverage on Saturday to get to the Final Four?
Exactly. And like even I mean, do you really think these networks want to? I mean, maybe it is a better ratings for like maybe TBS and True TV to have some of these early round games on, but like CBS probably doesn't want to be broadcasting again, like I don't know, South Carolina versus Rutgers in the first round. Like they don't want to be doing that. They want to show whatever they have because it probably gets better ratings than that. And like you said, they don't want it to cut into Masters. They don't want to cut into golf coverage, and it would absolutely if they extend it by a week or so. So it's perfect as it is. Just don't mess with it.
Yeah, I looked up the 2022 tournament. If you went based on the net, like what would have happened last year?
Yeah,
You're like St. John's would have made the field. It would have been the 84th team on the net.
yeah, like exactly. And St. John's was, I think, the eighth or ninth best team. I can't remember if they were the eighth. I think they were the eighth seed in the Big East this year. Like that, they had no business being anywhere near the NCAA tournament. Their season was over in like mid-January. They had no business being anywhere near an NCAA tournament game, and they would have been playing in a game. And like, yeah, it would have been great for me as a fan, but it would have felt cheap because it would have felt like, man, we were the 84th best team in the country. We don't deserve to play for a national title. We don't deserve to have anywhere have any be in that conversation whatsoever. So yeah, it just when you have a team, it hits me personally because I saw this team play all year, and when they'd be a team that's in the field, that tells me it's way too far.
Yeah, I think Jim Larinaga has been more on my model of like, let's get the teams that like win their leagues and don't lose the conference tournament. And like, I think that's the only way I'll be accepted. Like, it's like,
I don't hate that. Yeah.
because
Even if
that's expanding access, not like saying, oh, like you went like 14 and 16 in the Big 12. Congratulations,
yeah.
tournament.
I mean, I would love to like put a cap on that and say like, okay, there's like, but I guess you can't because you don't know how many other teams are gonna be in that case every year. But it'd be cool if you could say like, all right, we're gonna reserve 8 spots for these low major, mid major teams that maybe don't win their conference titles. But again, it's too tough because you don't know how many would actually do that every year.
Yeah, I had to do some research off the podcast, figure out like how often that happened in terms of like teams that like miss
Yeah.
what the number is a year, sort of figure that out. But like,
Hmm.
first thing I want to do here is like we'll look ahead to next season here. Like, obviously, way too early to actually say who's the top 25 in terms of like the transfer portal, the draft, like all that fun stuff. So like, who are some teams you have your eye on next year for
Hmm.
squads you feel like can make some noise next season?
Yeah. I mean,
That's up for record
well,
day because this could change in like the time the Hawkins is out.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna say I'm gonna stick in the Big East. I'm a Big East guy. You look at this conference right now. Marquette, they were a 2 seed this year. They lost a hard fought game to Michigan State. I think if they won that game, they would have had a really good shot at making it all the way to Houston. So that team was a Final Four caliber team. They, as of right now, they bring back pretty much everyone. Like they are going to be loaded. I think Jeff Goodman did, or his top 25, whatever. He had them as number one. Like they are really going to be a problem for teams next year. Creighton is in the same boat as them. Bring back pretty much everyone from a team that was in an Elite Eight and was a shot away from a Final Four, basically. They're going to be absolutely loaded. UConn just won the national title. They're going to lose some pieces, of course. They're absolutely going to lose like Hawkins and probably Sonogo as well. But they retool with one of the better recruiting classes in the country. They should be a top 10 team next year. And then, I mean, you look, Villanova, of course, is going to be in the conversation. And my school, St. John's, hiring Rick Pitino is going to, you would assume, be, around that conversation for the NCAA tournament, not to mention Georgetown getting better with Ed Cooley, Seton Hall in year 2 of Shaheen Holloway. Like a lot of these programs outside of probably Butler and DePaul, I think that 9 of the 11 Big East teams are going to go into next season feeling like they can make the NCAA tournament, which, I mean, what other conference can you say that about where, 80 something percent of their teams feel like they can make the tournament? So I got my eyes on the Big East. I think it's going to be a crazy good year for the Big East. One of the team I want to hit on as well is FAU. Made the Final Four, pretty much bring back everyone, going to bring back their head coach as well. They again, I feel like it's tough for these mid-major teams who kind of make a run and then have such high expectations going into the next year to actually live up to those expectations again. But FAU does bring everyone back, so you got to give them some credit as well.
Yeah,
Or as of right now, because we don't know. I mean, their season just ended, so they might lose some guys.
Yeah, plus you're sure that like guys in the high major are try and like get them to go into
Exactly. Yeah.
transfer
Mm-hmm.
up to them because like
Mm-hmm.
a couple other teams in the Big Ten out here throw out here. Purdue, if Zach Edey stays, just has pretty much everyone back from that team that started
Mm-hmm.
off really hot, and maybe none of the other freshmen won't be scared to shoot in NCAA tournament games. That would help for them. And Michigan State has got a very good recruiting class, and pretty much everyone back that team that got the Sweet 16 this year. I mean, apart from
Mm-hmm.
potentially Joey Hauser doesn't go for the 6th year, but like they're a team that like feels like they're kind of due to go on another deep like Final Four run. So like that's one you can keep your eye on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is kind of time for them, but just to play, I guess, devil's advocate on what we both just said. Bringing everyone back from a team that was really good the year before, of course, like it doesn't guarantee you anything. I mean, look at North Carolina this year; didn't even make the tournament from that team. Look at even UCLA the year prior. They made the Final Four. Obviously, bring pretty much everyone back last year, and I think they lost in the Sweet 16 to North Carolina. So, like, bringing everyone back doesn't automatically guarantee you the same success that you had the year before. But of course, at this point, when that's kind of all we have to go off of, those teams certainly have a good advantage.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest color for that this year is Florida Atlantic. I feel like everybody's got like love them, like, oh, 35
Uh,
last year, like everybody's back, so great. And then like they're stepping up to a higher league. The AAC is better than
mm-hmm.
the USA. I mean, like this might be a spot where like they're a better team. They lose more games. I feel like that could see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, and maybe be a lower seed in the tournament, and like you said, maybe be better, but maybe be on less people's radar than they were this year. That's absolutely a possibility.
Yeah, the thing I see also, I see people put them as high as 5 in like the poll and like the way to early top 25s. I mean, to me, I feel like that is recency bias because to me, like if you're up that high, you're saying like that team can win like the SEC or like they can win the big.
Yeah.
Like I don't think Florida Atlantic is that good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean, but who really knows what they're talking about with these top 25 polls? I mean, and they could change so much with the transfer portal, especially. Like these things could change. FAU could lose a couple of guys in the next week or so to high majors because they're absolutely going to come calling for some of those guys. So, talking about it in April, it's so hard to predict what these teams are going to look like 7 months from now, and especially 10, 11 months from now.
Yeah, you wait till the portal's over, for my opinion, before we really set that top.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think we got a month before that.
Yeah, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. If you want to follow you on social media, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Troy Mauriello. Last name's Mauriello. You are a St. John's fan. I do the Seeing Red podcast every once in a while, so definitely check that out.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear from you again once we start getting some Rick starts bringing some players in from the portal to sort of assess how they fit on the roster.
Yeah, he's got to start going to work. We are basically their whole roster transferred out now, so now we got to bring in some guys and some guys that fit under Rick's system. So we'll see. Hopefully that starts happening this week.
Yeah, I feel like they might be a little slow because of Easter coming up here. I feel like the next couple of weeks you're going to really see a lot of like action flying here.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I think the transfer portal is really going to start heating up now in the next 2-3 weeks.